You've been told to be kind, to forgive, to understand. But deep inside, you know that kindness hasn't saved you. It only made you quiet in your suffering. You kept believing that goodness was a shield, that if you were patient enough, gentle enough, selfless enough, life would spare you the cruelty it gives others. But it didn't. It broke you in silence. This is for the ones who've smiled through humiliation. The ones who said, "It's okay," when it wasn't. The ones who carried people who would never have lifted a finger for them. You believed your softness would heal the world, but it only left you unseen. And now you're wondering, why do the strong seem to rise, while the kind seem to disappear? Machiavelli once said, "It's better to be feared than loved." But maybe he wasn't talking about cruelty. Maybe he was talking about self-respect, about the kind of presence that demands to be treated with dignity. Because love without respect is slavery, and goodness without boundaries is destruction. If you've ever whispered to yourself, "Why does no one see how much I give?" If you've ever swallowed your truth just to keep the peace, if you've ever mistaken tolerance for strength, then this is for you. What if weakness isn't lack of muscle, but the inability to protect your own heart? What if failure in silence comes not from being unworthy, but from refusing to see the truth about people? Tonight, I want to tell you a story not of cruelty, but of awakening, of how the weakest fall, not because they are unkind, but because they refuse to learn what the strong already know, that the world does not bend for the gentle. It only respects those who dare to draw the line. So stay with me. This will not be easy. Some of what I'll say may sting, but it will sting the way truth does not to wound, but to wake you up. Because somewhere inside, you already know this. People will take until you stop them. Love will hurt until you redefine it. Life will keep testing you until you stop pretending that goodness alone will save you. And when you finally truly see, you'll realize that strength isn't the enemy of love. It's the foundation of it. If these words already speak to something inside you, don't turn away. Breathe. Stay. And if you feel this truth unfolding, subscribe, share, or leave a sign that you're still here, not because you have to, but because you know someone else needs to hear this too. Weak people fail in silence because they believe that suffering quietly is noble. They confuse endurance with virtue. They think holding everything in will make them stronger, or at least make them worthy of love. But silence doesn't earn respect. It only teaches others that your boundaries can be crossed without consequence. You see, when someone disrespects you and you say nothing, the world does not read it as forgiveness. It reads it as permission. And permission, once granted, is never taken back easily. You learned this the hard way. You kept giving people the benefit of the doubt. You kept hoping they'd see your heart and change. But people rarely change because you are kind. They change only when life, or loss, or consequence demands it. You wanted to be good, truly good, but somewhere along the way you confused good with harmless. You thought peace meant avoiding conflict. You thought love meant always saying yes. You thought patience would melt hearts. But here's the brutal truth. The world doesn't reward harmlessness. It rewards clarity. The lion may rest in the grass, but even in stillness, the savannah knows its power. And the fox, cunning and aware, survives not by fighting every battle, but by choosing which path keeps it alive. You can be both. You must be both. Soft enough to love, sharp enough to protect. You remember the times you felt used when someone took your loyalty as weakness, when your silence was met with arrogance, when you kept showing up for people who would never do the same for you. You told yourself it was love, but deep down, it was fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of losing your place in someone's world. Fear that if you said no, you'd stop being needed. That's how weakness grows. Not from lack of heart, but from the refusal to face fear. Weakness isn't crying or caring. It's staying quiet when your soul is screaming to be seen. You failed in silence because you wanted peace more than truth. You thought truth would make you unlovable. But truth is what love grows from. Lies, even soft, well-intentioned ones, rot every relationship from the inside out. Machiavelli wrote that men are driven more by fear than by love. Maybe he understood something most never do, that love without respect becomes exploitation, and fear not terror, but the quiet awareness that actions have consequence keeps the balance. If you want peace, you must stop begging for it. Create it. If you want respect, stop asking. Command it not with force, but with presence. You can forgive someone and still walk away. You can love deeply and still say no. You can be kind without being naive. That is not cruelty. That is clarity, because strength doesn't destroy softness. It protects it. The weak fail in silence because they build their lives around the hope that someone else will finally understand them. The strong rise because they finally understand themselves, and that understanding changes everything. You stop chasing validation. You stop performing goodness for those who cannot see it. You start seeing the world not as you wish it to be, but as it is. And in that realism, you find power. You begin to see who's truly there for you. Not the ones who flatter, but the ones who respect your boundaries. You begin to notice the quiet manipulations, the subtle guilt trips, the conditional affection. You see through them, and you no longer feel the need to explain yourself, because the truth is, weak people explain, strong people act. There comes a night when you finally stop waiting for an apology that will never come. You stop hoping they'll see the pain in your silence. You stop proving your worth. And that night, though it feels like a death, is actually your rebirth. You don't become cold. You become clear, and from that clarity, strength is born. If you're still listening, if your chest feels heavy but alive, it means your heart is remembering something it once knew, that you were never meant to stay small for the sake of love. You were meant to rise, even if it means standing alone for a while. There's a quiet kind of tragedy in always trying to be the good one. You know that role well. The one who apologizes first, who over-explains, who fixes the mess even when you didn't make it. You wear goodness like armor, thinking it will protect you from betrayal, from rejection, from loss. But armor made of kindness only makes it easier for others to pierce you without guilt. You became addicted to being needed. You mistook usefulness for love. You convinced yourself that if you gave enough, people would see your worth. But people don't see what costs you everything. They see what you give freely and assume it comes easily. So they take, not because they are evil, but because you never told them not to. That's the truth about human nature. Machiavelli saw not darkness, but honesty. People move toward what serves them. It doesn't make them monsters. It makes them human. The cruelty comes when you expect humanity to act against its nature, when you give endlessly to those who never learned how to give back. And every time you say, "It's fine," when your soul is bleeding, you teach them it truly is. Every time you excuse disrespect, you whisper to the universe, "I will carry this again." The illusion of goodness is that it believes being kind is enough. But goodness without wisdom destroys itself. There's a reason the lion is feared and the fox is respected. The lion reminds the world that strength exists, and the fox reminds it that awareness saves lives. Be both, not to manipulate, but to survive with grace. You cannot love purely in a world that often rewards deception. You must love clearly, to see people as they are, not as you wish them to be. Think about the last time you ignored your intuition, that subtle ache in your chest, the quiet voice that said, "Something's not right." You silenced it because you didn't want to seem harsh, because you believed giving someone the benefit of the doubt was moral. But doubt is not cruelty. It's your spirit trying to protect itself. You lose yourself every time you silence that voice. Weakness begins when your intuition must beg for your attention. Strength begins when you start listening. Machiavelli's world was ruthless. Yes, but so is the emotional world we live in now. Every smile has subtext. Every act of kindness may carry expectation. Every silence has a cost. The wise are not cynical. They are simply awake. To see people as they are doesn't mean you stop loving. It means you start choosing how to love. You stop pouring yourself into the cracks of others, trying to fill what only they can repair. You stop performing goodness for those who only applaud when it benefits them. You stop explaining yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you, and you start speaking truth even if your voice shakes. Because when you tell the truth, some people will leave. The ones who thrived on your silence, your compliance, your endless yes, they will vanish. It will hurt. You will doubt yourself. You will wonder if you've become the cruel one. But you haven't. You've become honest. Weak people always fail in silence because they keep waiting for others to notice their pain. But no one can read pain that you wrap in smiles, so let it be seen. There's power in saying, no more. Power in saying, that hurt me. Power in saying, I will not carry what is not mine. It doesn't make you unkind, it makes you real. And the moment you become real, people start treating you differently. Some will resent it, others will respect it. But most importantly, you will respect yourself. That's where transformation begins, not in becoming harder, but in becoming whole. You'll notice something strange. The world that once felt cruel begins to soften when you stop chasing approval. You start meeting people who mirror your truth. You start creating instead of fixing. You start living instead of performing. The weak are not condemned forever. They are simply asleep, dreaming that love must always hurt, that peace must always cost silence. But when they wake, they understand. Strength is the gentlest form of love there is. So listen closely. Strength is not found in fighting others. It's found in no longer fighting yourself. The hardest truth to accept is that people rarely love you the way you love them. You give your heart like an open sky wide, forgiving, endless. And they build their houses beneath it, never once looking up to thank the light. You stay, hoping that if you love harder, they'll see you clearer. But the ones who take too easily never look for depth. They look for comfort. You think your kindness will teach them how to care, but all it teaches them is that you'll stay, no matter how deeply they wound you. And so, the cycle repeats. The gentle become invisible, and the selfish become adored. But here's something Machiavelli would whisper to you if he sat beside you now. In this quiet room where your chest still carries the weight of unspoken words. The world does not respect goodness that does not defend itself. Read that again, slowly. You thought being humble would protect you from arrogance. You thought that being forgiving would inspire gratitude. You thought your softness would melt the cold. But you've learned painfully that humility without strength turns into humiliation. Forgiveness without consequence becomes invitation. Softness without boundary becomes self-destruction. You were never meant to be everyone's safe place. You were meant to be your own first. The lion and the fox, two sides of the same spirit. The lion roars, so the world remembers its presence. The fox listens, so it knows when to strike or when to disappear. You have both inside you, but you've been silencing the lion for too long, whispering your truth when you should have spoken it aloud. You've hidden your cunning because you feared being seen as calculating. But survival is not manipulation. It's wisdom. It's okay to be aware. It's okay to see through smiles, to recognize intentions, to walk away without guilt. The naive call it coldness. The wise call it self-respect. You don't owe everyone warmth. You owe yourself honesty. The illusion of goodness has cost you years of peace. You've mistaken silence for grace and sacrifice for love. But love that demands your silence is not love, it's control wrapped in tenderness. The world tells you to be selfless, but those who thrive are not selfless. They are self-possessed. They know where they end and where others begin. They know that to give from an empty soul is to give resentment disguised as affection. Think of how many times you've bent your truth to avoid hurting someone's feelings only to end up hurting yourself more. How many times you've smiled through discomfort, played small to keep the peace, allowed someone's opinion to overwrite your intuition. And then, when you finally break, they call you too emotional. But emotion is not weakness. It is evidence that you still care, even after the world tried to turn you numb. The weak suffer in silence because they believe no one would stay if they showed their truth. But the strong speak, and the right people stay because of that truth. So here's what you must understand. Courage is not loud. It's the quiet decision to stop betraying yourself for love that never honors you. Machiavelli's brutal wisdom wasn't meant to make you ruthless. It was meant to make you real, to remind you that peace without power is illusion, that love without respect is bondage, that life rewards those who dare to confront reality as it is not as they wish it to be. The day you start seeing people clearly, everything changes. You stop romanticizing potential. You stop thinking you can save those who don't want saving. You stop forgiving patterns that have no intention of changing. You start walking away not with bitterness, but with peace. And yes, it will feel lonely. Strength always does at first, because silence feels louder when it's filled with truth. You'll miss the illusion of closeness more than the people themselves, but give it time. The quiet that once felt like emptiness will start to feel like freedom. You will breathe differently, move differently, speak differently. You'll start noticing the calm in your chest where chaos used to live. That's what real power feels like, not domination, not control, but peace that no one can take from you. And slowly, you'll realize you didn't lose your kindness. You refined it. You didn't lose your heart. You just stopped handing it to those who never learned to hold it. And when people notice that shift, the calm, the boundaries, the absence of over-explaining, they'll wonder what changed. Some will say you've become colder, but you'll know the truth. You've simply stopped bleeding for those who never offered a bandage. That is the beginning of true strength. There comes a day when you finally stop asking why they left, why they lied, why they didn't see you. You stop needing explanations that would never bring peace, because deep down, you already know the truth. They treated you the way you allowed them to. And that realization, though it burns, also sets you free. You were never weak because you loved. You were weak because you loved without protecting yourself. You gave your loyalty to those who hadn't earned it, your patience to those who mistook it for passivity, your forgiveness to those who counted on it. And each time, you told yourself it was the right thing to do, because good people always forgive, don't they? Good people always give another chance. Good people stay until the very end. But maybe you were never supposed to be good in the way they defined it. Maybe you were meant to be true. There's a difference. Goodness can be manipulated. Truth cannot. You learned that when you started speaking up, people called you difficult. When you started setting boundaries, they called you selfish. When you stopped tolerating disrespect, they said you'd changed. But what they really meant was this: you stopped being easy to use, and that's when everything starts to shift. You begin to realize that your silence was never peace. It was suppression. That your understanding was often self-abandonment. That your forgiveness was sometimes fear dressed in virtue. You see, weakness isn't just about being passive. It's about being blind to who people really are, and to who you could become if you stopped begging for love that requires your suffering. Machiavelli wrote about power, but his words whisper deeper when you apply them to the heart. He said fortune favors the bold, not the loud, not the cruel, the bold, those who act, who decide, who dare. You've spent too long waiting for a sign, for closure, for permission. But life doesn't hand clarity to those who wait. It reveals itself to those who move. Courage is not about never falling. It's about refusing to stay down when the world pretends not to notice your pain. You start learning that no can be a holy word. That distance can be an act of love. That solitude is not loneliness. It's the soil where self-respect finally grows. You begin to see that peace isn't the absence of noise. It's the presence of boundaries, and you'll meet people who will test this newfound strength. They'll try to pull you back into your old softness, the overgiving, the over-explaining, the constant apology for existing. But you'll feel it now, that quiet resistance in your chest that says, "Not this time," because you've tasted what it means to choose yourself. And once you do, everything that asks you to shrink starts to taste like poison. Weak people fail in silence, because they keep waiting for the world to validate their pain. But the strong don't need validation. They create meaning from it. They build from it. They rise carrying the lessons like armor, not shame. And that's where true freedom lives. Not in being untouchable, but in being unafraid of who you are when everything falls apart. You begin to understand that love, real love, isn't something you earn. It's something you recognize in yourself first, and the moment you give yourself the love you've been begging others for, the dynamic of your entire life shifts. You stop chasing people. You stop explaining your worth. You stop waiting for someone to choose you, because you finally realize you were never waiting for them. You were waiting for yourself. The illusion fades. The silence breaks. And for the first time, your voice doesn't tremble when you say, "I deserve better." That's not arrogance. That's truth. When you see yourself clearly, you see others clearly too. You stop confusing charm for character. You stop mistaking pity for compassion. You stop romanticizing those who hurt you and calling it destiny. You see the pattern for what it is, and that sight, that awakening, is power. Machiavelli was right in his own ruthless way. The world bows not to the good-hearted, but to the self-possessed, to those who carry both tenderness and fire and know when to use each, to those who no longer beg to be seen because they already see themselves. And one day, when you look in the mirror, you'll notice something different. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of calm. Not the old desperation for approval, but the quiet certainty of self. You'll look at your reflection and whisper, almost in disbelief, "I made it." And you did not because the world became kinder, but because you stopped betraying yourself in the name of kindness. In the end, strength is not what you thought it was. It isn't loud or unfeeling. It isn't about proving anything. It's the stillness that comes after you've finally stopped fighting for people who never fought for you. It's the quiet confidence of knowing you no longer have to beg to be understood. It's walking away not because you stopped caring, but because you started caring for yourself. Weak people fail in silence because they confuse endurance with purpose. But you understand that silence is sacred only when it's chosen, not when it's forced. You understand that love without truth is cruelty, that peace without boundaries is prison, and that kindness without strength is self-erasure. And maybe this realization doesn't feel like victory. Maybe it feels like loss, like shedding a version of yourself that the world praised for being so nice. But one day, you'll look back and realize that was never love. That was submission dressed as virtue, and you were always meant to outgrow it. So don't fear the loneliness that comes with growth. It's not emptiness, it's space. Space for new love, new power, new peace. The kind that doesn't demand you disappear to deserve it. You will still be kind, still be gentle, still be the one who loves deeply. But now, you'll also be the one who knows where to draw the line. And that is what makes you unstoppable. If these words reach something raw inside you, let them stay. And if they helped you see yourself more clearly, share them. Not for me, but for the next soul who's still suffering in silence, thinking goodness means surrender. Let them know strength is the purest form of love.